Okay, just a minute.
Yes, we are now at this amazing point in which we finally reach the last extension. The first human creation was language, and we finally reach the last technology that contains this powerful creation, which is spoken word. You said the only way to resist the environment as it's changing into the new ionic environment is to be healthy. That's the only real activism and the only real resistance. And there are two aspects. One is the health of the physical body that we can induce taking the products we develop with Dr. Dean. And there is the other bodies that also need to be addressed and also need this coherent food. And one of the tools we have for that is to study your chart, because in the chart everything that happened since the fall, what is happening now, and what is to become, is explained. So we are going to start a new space, and this is a presentation maybe for people who never heard about the chart, and we're making an introduction about what is this thing Bob has been telling us for 40 years called the chart.
Okay, so yeah, it's very important that you bring up the word health, because I'm certainly not talking about regular health that the AMA and the nutritional councils and the joggers are promoting. The health I'm talking about is the five-body interplay, the ecology of the five bodies moving toward the sixth body, or the hexatic. And this chart is the prescription, is the little note the doctor gives you when you go to his office and he tells you what drugs to take. Well, if you note in the Dobbs quadrant, the fifth quadrant, I categorize myself as doctor. So there I am, being a doctor. And this is the prescription note, the Xenocrates Bob's tiny note, which equals the Grand Wazoo's decade dance. It builds on what Frank offers as a acoustic, tactile approach to health. And Zappa had a song, Imaginary Diseases, the House of Imaginary Diseases. So if you look on the chart, you'll see that each quadrant referenced a health issue. The first quadrant says lung cancer. This is in the far left column, one column in. So two in from the left side. So the LaRouche quadrant is lung cancer, or the satellited radio is lung cancer. The satellited TV is heart disease. The computerized satellited computer, environmental allergies, and the Croker satellite squared is chronic fatigue, and then in the Dobbs quadrant, it's immune deficiency. So you see the traditional health concerns are right there in the chart, and I meant that level. Now for health today is a big challenge, and is best tackled through studying what I recommend. I think health comes through understanding and clearing up your labyrinth of your mind and its interaction with social motor, which to the degree that you don't understand it, you have unnecessary stress, and then that creates the stress that leads to dis-ease. So my note here, my tiny note, that the chart is a map of what you engage to get to a new kind of yoga. So I'm not advocating acupuncture, Bach flower remedies, or chemotherapy, or x-rays. If someone asks you to do that, yeah, do it. But a deeper way to understand your health is to understand my chart. So the whole world's possessed by the android meme. That's the virus. That's the fifth horseman of the Armageddon or of the apocalypse that nobody really spelled out other than, what's his name, Nostradamus, and a correct interpretation of the Book of Revelation. Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci seem to understand this too. So the decadence that leads to a state of agitation and pretty soon collapse and disease and death, my work is an antidote to that. Now, part of the work was in play, was the evoking of ion, which then gave us the medicines, the foods and substances to eat to relax yourself so you can enjoy the various classes offered on my chart. Each chart is an important source of information that one should become adept at handling and understanding. And this would lead to a quadrophenic approach to your well-being, where you can engage different worlds, different memes, different schools of perception without getting lost in them and not necessarily relying on them. So it's a new kind of detachment while remaining very involved and able to put on any dimension, any media environment and post-media environment that comes to you. So that was the initial agenda of the chart. It was partly modeled on, at the time in 1995, when I got the idea to make and organize this chart. Carol and I were living in New York, and she was working with MIR, which stood for Magnetically Influenced Herbal Remedies. And it had four aspects: acupuncture, herbs, homeopathy, and magnetic or electric spin. So you would basically take a homeopathic formula, put it into a needle, inject the needle into an acupuncture point, and then put electric spin on it, and that had pretty remarkable results on people's health. It was working at the cellular level and helping the cell communicate better. So I was thinking, okay, you've got the four parts that make up Carolyn's technique, and this was invented by Walter Fishman. And then you have the collective health being brought forth by the discovery of cold fusion by Pons and Fleischmann. So I put together the collective palliative, collective health generation would come through cold fusion, and the personal medicine for your particular body would be the MIR. So I think I had it organized that McLuhan was acupuncture, because you got China in the McLuhan quadrant. Herbs was William Irwin Thompson, because he was a person who talked about herbs and discussed the history of them, even applied them to fairy tales. Herbs being some of the messages embedded in Rapunzel, I think was the fairy tale. And then Croker would be homeopathic, because Baudrillard developed the metaphor of homeopathy, and then Croker picked up on it from Baudrillard. And that leaves LaRouche would be magnetism, basic electronic spin charge, Western use of electricity. So LaRouche is electricity, McLuhan is the acupuncture needle, Thompson is the herbs, and then the potentizing of the herbs is the Croker quadrant. So they come together and they're distributed by Dobstown. And as remarkable as Mir was, it was not as amazing as what was coming with ion, with the RNA drops in the modulation through chromosome 14. So my chart, unbeknownst to me, predicted the solution. And I have spent many years looking back and seeing how Zappa, McLuhan, Thompson, Croker, LaRouche, May Brussel, Dr. Beater anticipated this solution in their own particular genius, in their own particular bias, in their own particular expertise. And so the interplay of the wisdom that comes from those people, which is mined by different environments inside the Android beam, so that these environments, like radio, television, computer, and satellite, they're holeopathized and shrunk, and then they actually don't exist anymore once they're in the Android beam phase of the last 30 years. So the integration of these extensions of the machinic talking to itself and refining itself, shrinking itself, and eventually getting to the breakthrough of cold play or cold fusion is what I meant in the chart. I knew what I meant, but I didn't know how the outcome would be. So Ines said that once you become quite ascended or quite transcended or quite happy or quite feeling successful and at ease with your skin, what do? You study Bob. And that means to study the interplay of these various environments symbolized by the components of Mir. So, I don't think I've ever said that before in public. Yes, you want to say something?
Yes, because I want to add that you did the chart before Ion, and now after interacting with Ion for a few years, you have a complete different understanding of what you were doing and
Yeah.
the repercussions of this new science. And I think the new thing in what we want to do is that we want to present it as part of the evolution of all these medias, all these technologies, until we get to the last extension. It's amazing how science was a result of metaphysical research in a way, like the first scientist in the West wanted to understand the glory and the power of God, and they went to research, for example, optics to understand the glory, the light, or astronomy to understand these laws of nature that they call the book of nature, because they were biased by the Gutenberg galaxy. But now that we are beyond even the electronic environment and the Android meme, that you are showing the new ground of the coming environment, we can understand why McLuhan said this is a new science. And he went to develop the laws of media, but you are even beyond that, because you already said tetrad management is also obsolete. But I think the new thing with what we want to report is just that this is a new science that goes beyond the Gutenberg biased science that denies the non-physical, that it has to recognize it again, and it was also the source of the research, and it's not esoteric or new age, it's just part of your studies of media and ecology.
The tetrad was developed in Finnegan's Wake, and then McLuhan saw that. Then management during World War I and World War II used the tetrad to preserve its sovereign position at the top of society. And that worked until late 60s, early 70s. And then when the android came forward, it took over and imitated the process of tetrad management. And basically that form of management, tetrad management, means you know that some new environment is going to be created every week or so. You know that it's going to appear to obsolesce some previous environment, which will cause an excessive action in that obsolescent environment. And you know that things that resonate with the new situation will be retrieved. And then you'll know when it carries on basically for too long, then it flips into opposite characteristics. And you can find this process happens in your own psychology, in the way you work through your own rhythms in your daily life, that four-part process. So when the android meme took it over, we call it pentatic because the four-part process is being done by the machinic. So you include the fusion of the machine and the human, and that's pentatic. So pentatic management is the android meme doing tetrad management. So you can look at, in my memo to Prince Charles, I take each of the people figured in the tiny node chart and I show how you can use them, but eventually they flip out and go into an opposite character. So you watch what McLuhan, when you engage McLuhan, you watch what it enhances, you see what it obsolesces, what McLuhan, the meme of McLuhan's media studies, what it retrieves, and then which other grouping, or what I call holy office, or structured environment anthropomorphized by a particular person, whether it's Herbert W. Armstrong, LaRouche, May Brussel, or Finnegan's Wake, you see what the morphing is and where that shows up as the new extension. So in the memo to Prince Charles, done in June 4th, 1987, I lay out how one thinks about this world that's creating all these stresses in you, and how you created models to hold off your attention and to diminish the sense of contrast. And it requires a lot of enjoyment of studying and engaging these sources of information. And since Ian showed up, as I got to understand what Ian was saying, I recognized that iron was the original technology, the first invention by fallen man, and that was a happy fall. We decided to limit ourselves because we knew we could get out of that problem. That would show our power. So the very first technology was the thing that would hold fragmented humanity together, and that's called the non-physical. So we eventually have to come back to the non-physical as the technological evolution unfolded. And that's where we arrived in 2009, say 9 months after the collapse of the Android meme in mid-2008. It's known as the financial crash of September 2008. So since finance was the blood, and money was the spiritual, almost non-physical, that was holding society together, when money completely collapsed and couldn't communicate anymore among its machinic parts, that left a whole new aspect of the non-physical to come forth, and ion did that in March 2009. And now we've had a lot of extraordinary technologies dropped in our lap, thanks to ion. And these are all sort of technologies that help adapt you and give you the slack to handle the actual change when ion, as the first technology, becomes aware of itself and starts creating. And the term we use for that is the substance called the I cell. So as the I cell rapidly spread around the world in 2009, like a virulent virus, it changed everything in the frequencies of people's natural habitat. And most of the crises today are people adapting to that new frequency. So the bottom of my tiny note chart says that this is the prophetic part. It says, waiting for organic bodies, the spinning clothing crystals have danced the hex advertisement, so that the changes and challenges coming in with the hexatic, which is the period of ion when this virus, this I cell, is influencing everything in matter, substance, and media, and nature, and art. That new environment, the hexatic, my chart was predicting it. So we are exploring, for example, Frank Zappa right now, and we can show where Frank was accidentally, or the language coming off of him more than he realized was predicting ionic aspects. And you can see that in LaRouche, McLuhan, Beater, and May Brussel. And they're lumped into different general moods. You know, LaRouche and May Brussel are paranoia. McLuhan is schizophrenia. McLuhan and Zappa are schizophrenia. Thompson and Krishnamurti are paranoia. Hysteria. And Croker and Beater are panic, and then ecstasy in the Garrett Dean Dobbs quadrant. The emotions that the Android meme simulates and attempts to appear human is what people are reacting to. And that was what the drama of perception engaged, say, from 1980s, very general, because it begins in 67, when Rai returns to the plane of essence. That's when the Android meme, the cobwebs of Rai, come alive and simulate artificial intelligence. So you have, that goes 40 years, 67 to 2007, 2008. And people lived what McLuhan called mythically, in very comprehensive, generalized capsules of experience and deep feeling, but usually it was categorized as paranoia, schizophrenia, hysteria, panic, and ecstasy. That's what the medical profession would rely on for its categorization, and none of it worked. Those categories don't hold up, and we're now into a point where people are having all kinds of strange feelings and anomalies, and don't have the words or medical categories to contain it, so that they rush around adopting different therapies every 3 months as an attempt to get a balance. And we've witnessed that over the last 30 years, and that's why the chart has the various phases. 30 years ago, lung cancer would be a major cause for people, because you had the people before the baby boomers, and some of the baby boomers starting to drop dead from an industrial disease, lung cancer. And then you had the stress of feeling alienated from the new dimension that the baby boomer generation and Generation X would bring in. So people started to feel isolated and lonely. So they got heart disease. So that started to spread even more than lung cancer. And then you had people in the 80s starting to get allergic to things, to old media environments. So that's environmental allergies in the Thompson quadrant. And then you had, in the late 80s, early 90s, people exhausted, like McLuhan said. People would find out in the 21st century that they can't live at the speed of light. Well, that's true until ion shows up. We now offer you the ways to live at the speed of light, or the speed of thought, or even the speed of neutrino, which is the world of it's already happened. So the chronic fatigue was a major syndrome affecting people, all over the world, but especially in the West. And so that's in the Croker era. And then you have immune deficiency, which is basically your body can't handle anything. And you're actually quite neurotic in what you think you can engage. You can't engage gluten, you can't engage wheat, you can't engage sugar, you can't engage sex or sperm or things like that. So you get a very neurotic population by the 90s or the last 15 years, super sensitive and basically having pretty painful lives. And doctors in medicine not able to even be a palliative. So then people start inventing new forms of palliative, from Reiki therapy to color therapy to what would be, name anything. Just look at a New Age magazine, they get all kinds of therapies. Now, none of these are palliative. They help people. They're better than the major drugs because the side effects of drugs are just too powerful for the body. So you have weaker, you could say softer forms of medicine to handle your health issues. And they were popular, but as Dr. Dean has shown, they started to be weak about 10 years ago. So by 2010, people were really messed up because the alternative therapies weren't working, the regular medicine wasn't working, so they were in a pretty dire strait. And fortunately, we come along with our products, which, and you can witness this any week on Carolyn's show, you can hear the testimonies are pretty incredible. And we're just beginning and starting with our products. So my chart is a description and prediction of the eye cell and its effect. But the mind has to figure out what it is and organize its assumptions and its sort of legacy of meme worship. It has to sort of readjust that. And the goal is to not be so engaged in your mind. Once you have the RNA drops working on your chromosome 14, you find it's maybe even difficult to use your mind, even though I would say it was difficult to do odd abstraction, the old kind of thinking, but you are very attentive and can respond with quick wit and quick intelligence to the immediate task. So it's a different kind of intelligence. And that's what the drops create in the person. So the chart predicts and then provides the cushions, the fun, the periods of downtime where you have time in your hands and you like to wonder what to think about or what you want to converse about. So I've picked the best conversationalists, and they are all what I call satellite conductors. They're all operating from a solar perspective, not just William Irwin Thompson's planetary culture. It's a solar culture. It even gets into the universal cultures and mythic stage and virtual reality, and then the anthropomorphic physical. So these positions that you conduct, as you see in the manner that Zappa conducts his band, rapid, shifting, quite... Oh, did you want to say something?
Yes, I only wanted to add that because you are a new type of artist, scientist,
Yes.
it can be confusing for people that are used to the visual space and the categories and the specialization. It's McLuhan said we are looking in the rear view mirror, you are looking back to understand what's going on. But it's more like looking in a kaleidoscope, because it's not only looking back, it's looking in all directions, and this is the new tactile creator. You mentioned Zappa, and Zappa is a great example of this new type of artist that erases these boundaries between high art and low art and technology and many other things, because that's one of the discoveries of McLuhan when he discovered everything, all human creations are like words, and everything has the same value as an outering. It doesn't matter if it's what we consider high or low culture. Everything can be presented at the same level. And Zappa was presenting that in his creation. And Zappa is not only about music. To really understand what he was doing, you have to understand what Bob is saying. And
Yes.
I want to say this because it can be confusing for people to listen to you and talk about health and then talk about politics and arts and all types of topics. But this is where we're going, and it's a new type of perception, and this is what this the real art is showing, the new ground and the new tactility, which is not the tactile sense, but the interaction of all senses and the synesthesia.
Okay, so the electric environment is a tactile extension of our tactility. That was what McLuhan established. So what I present in the chart is the enhancement, the extension of tactility in various phases. So from radio to TV to computer to satellite is they're figures of the constant tactile effect of electricity, but they put a different spin on the tactility. They emphasize the complementary sensory makeup. So LaRouche is a philosopher of tactility. McLuhan is a media analyst of tactility, and they do this in their style. And Thompson is a tactile philosopher of Buddhism and the new spirituality. And Coker watches and observes the tactility mirrored back to us through the Android meme. So every one of these quadrants is dealing with tactility, and the anthropomorphic personage like LaRouche is reflecting the tactile mirror that the homeopathic radio is offering, satellited radio. So originally the satellite environment created the interplay of all kinds of media as its content. So the satellite was a visualization of the tactile organ in our being. And so that's why everything is reduced to satellite to indicate the tactile ground. And then you add on radio, which had a certain acoustic bias, and television has a multisensory bias, and the computer has a proprioceptive bias, and LaRouche has a kinetic bias. So you have a combination of tactile, kinetic in LaRouche, tactile incarnate in McLuhan, and then you have tactile proprioceptive in Thompson. Then you have the Android meme being tactile incarnate. That's after the global theater. It becomes a global membrane, which McLuhan intuited. So you have this tactility squared in the Croker thing. And then you have my quadrant, which is pointing to a post-tactile situation. I don't even know what that would be at the time I made the chart. It's interesting that McLuhan wrote in the New York Times in 1974 an op-ed where he talked about tactility having been sort of into the rearview mirror phase, and the exploitation of the tactile interval became part of the Wall Street and the stock exchange, the exploiting of the interval. So tactility had become the content of a new weird situation, which I would call the Android meme. And Ion has come forth as a explainer of the role of tactility in all our chemical, sociological interactions. And it's not operating from the tactile level. Tactility is contrast. Ion is not contrast. Ion is the cushion and explainer of the role of contrast in our situation. And Ion said tactility is contrast. So the ebb and flow of our natural cycles is a tactile interplay, not just a yin-yang, not just a dialectic here and there and back again. It's in all directions, And a good image of that is the pumping heart. Watch your heart pumping. It's hard to follow visually all the ins and outs of it. That's a good metaphor for tactility. So the reason why LaRouche, McLuhan, Thompson, Croker, and Zappa are not understood is because they are expressing the tactile. And the first thing one has to do to understand what happened in the 20th century, why the sciences went in their conceptual directions, is really understand how tactility, which is not a sense, but the interplay of senses, and then you understand how it was extended in the TV and then the satellite environment. TV was an extension of tactility within itself, but the interplay of all these media environments in the global theater, the media actors, is the tactile perspective from the satellite position. And then the Andor mean shrinks that. So the chart is a picture of rampant tactility, which leads to rampant contrast and mostly lethal until you can see through the tactile android mean and how it seduces with its tactility among its own parts. It doesn't seduce you anymore. It leaves you stranded and stressed out and pretty well dead. Roadkill. And so this would be an impossible situation. So when McLuhan said that humans would discover in the 21st century that they couldn't live at the speed of light, that's a very thin statement. It's true, but the complexities of all the environments and the holopathizing of them, people getting great insights in this time, it's the highest decibels of consciousness, people feeling great blisses of pattern recognition. This is the daily diet of many humans on our planet, but it's a manic bipolar process, to make it simple. If up and down, manic and then depressed, and up and down, and here and there, and very chaotic for the person. And that's why more and more of the population has to be on medications just to survive the ride. So my chart is a picture of the Ferris wheel, of the surfing multi-waved environment that you are being pushed through regardless of your opinions of things and regardless of your knowledge that you bring to it. This is a process that is not registered in your brain. You have to come up with different modalities. You have to sort of fake an invention of an odd kind of perception, odd kind of brain. You can become a mutant without going through the Hollywood science fiction version of something like the Alien or whatever David Lynch was trying to show in Twin Peaks with the Bob monster. These are approximations of what my chart is saying is a better way to look at it. So the chart is a guide to the drugs you're going to take. And the drugs you're going to take is, at this point, call into our show, and it'll be an ongoing explanation of the situation. It can't be sort of understood immediately. You have to engage it. It's like learning jujitsu. You got to learn, you got to get in there and do it. So we present ourselves as an ongoing gymnasium for perceptual calisthenics, and athletics, and all kinds of sport. Oh, I think I guess the word's coming out of our colleague.
Yes, it's what Ion calls the completion.
Yes, we are offering a completion. And, you know, Carolyn Guertin in her new book, Digital Prohibition, talks about the art product. The artifact is not what art is anymore. It's not there to make the artifact. It's the process of interaction in response to whatever transient product you produce. It's your ability to interact with the effects of the product, to study the gap and the interval between its audience and the creator. That's the process that we're offering in engagement. And that's why we're a unique situation, because we've got the ultimate processor, Ion, who can outspeed the Android processor, as Croker calls it, and out-talk, out-perceive, and yet create great hilarity while doing it. So I'm trying to make the most grandiose claims, the most exaggerated claims to point out how far ahead of the game Iondom and Dobbstown is. It can sound like I'm a complete megalomaniac, but that doesn't matter because people ignore that and start engaging and they get the benefits. So I'm actually presenting a new form of hospital, a new form of hospices, a new form of multi-level therapy is what engaging in Payday and Dr. Dean's show and Ginny's show and what youth. These processes are the definition of creativity that Carolyn Guertin presents in her book Digital Prohibition, which came out, I think, in 2012. She does a good job of laying out the bizarre characteristics of the Android meme, and then she doesn't have a solution, but she shows what all the new digital art media are pointing to. And she's documenting much that's happened over the last 10 years, so good chunk of it happens before Ion shows up. She's not aware, as far as I know, of the completion of her scenario, of what the art world is in tune for, and what Mark Hansen is trying to talk about too, that it showed up in March 2009. So we say that the archives, thousands of hours of archives that we've created, are the completion of the operatic art form, the completion of the painting art form, the sculpture, the musical, the novelist, the essay, the book, the sexual, the cuisine arts, all the forms of expression that humans have invented. Agriculture is completed in our operation. And it would take an extraordinary creation like that to counter the very depressing losing dimension that the Android meme brings to the old chemical body, to the human dimension. That's why, you have people taught in school and college now, but we're post-human. And who knows what they think that is. And it's normally, you can see that what are so-called youth going to present of themselves if they think there's another kingdom to present to. And many of them don't even bother doing that anymore, relating to another world. So it's a devastating time for the chemical body and the astral body too. And it requires outstanding, incredible anti-environment, an unimaginable, mysterious anti-environment to counter what the Android meme has done to us. And we did it, and it's here. Now, let's see what you say. Am I explaining the chart? Am I getting somewhere with it?
Yes, wonderful. Because it's amazing that it seems like a lot of people, like McLuhan said, are still in the past, and there is a retrieval of the Crusades,
yes,
of the fight against the enlightened encyclopedist values.
right.
All these collections of books and the one book, and we're in a post-literate time, and some people think it's about these two medias that are the books, the different books colliding, and it's interesting how this is being retrieved when it's already so obsolete.
Well, remember, McLuhan defined obsolescence as it becomes more prominent, more and more people engage in writing. You've got baby boomers now, and soon the Generation X. By the time people reach 55, 60 years old, they think they got to write a book about what they did, about their life, and most of it's self-published or vanity press. But everybody of the Western modality thinks they have to translate their experience, the remarkable experience they've had over the last 60, 70, 80 years into a book form. So it's a kind of fundamentalism. So people are going to be writing out their memoirs of their loser lives, and loser in the sense that they did not come up with a solution to the situation. So it becomes a sickening, pale, desperate attempt at projecting visual space for one last time, and it's pitiful. But we have solutions for that. So you may be put into a despondent mood by us, but we quickly, if you could hear it, you can hear an antidote to what I'm accusing you of. You, a bunch of you out there that are lost in your vanities. You wouldn't dare brag the way I brag. You have standards of how far you go in your vanity. You wouldn't get on and say what I'm saying. You haven't got the guts. You haven't killed your vanity organism, so you actually are protecting it and saving it for a rainy day. So you actually don't like people who appear vain, and you would not like what I'm presenting here, and that's your guilt. That is your disease, or as Thingfish says in Zappa's book, Them or Us, your resease, R-E-S-E-A-S-E. R-E-S-E-A-S-E, your resease, not disease, your resease, and replay. Replay of your seas, the water of your guff. Remember, the guff is symbolized by a lake or an ocean. So redoing the guff is what people are doing when they're trying to create their rearview mirror books to explain themselves. Me and one of the Jesuses, the third Jesus, and Socrates, we were cool. We don't write books. Jesus didn't leave a book, Socrates didn't, and Bob didn't. But it turns out my chart is the one book that the book of Revelations points to. Can you imagine that? If you look in the book of Revelations, there's a whole section on the little book, and that little book is my chart. So I actually did, by default, write a book, and that's what the chart is. And it's something that you can use for many, many millennia, because it encompasses the whole history of the fall and the resolution of the fall and the celebration of the fall. That's what's in that chart. We have an interloper. Yes?
Yes, people may not be writing a book, but they have their blogs, their webs, their Facebook, their Instagram.
Yeah, they're typing.
Different types of their chats, they're commenting on everything. And Joyce made a wonderful translation of the mythic when he wrote the Ulysses, and he takes again the archetype of the Odyssey and puts it in one day of the life of a man.
Yeah.
And everybody's like trying to retrieve this mythical.
Yes.
The
myth means to contain. It contains the encapsulation of the culture. So a myth is a reduction, a simplification, a formula for understanding the overwhelming environment that pre-lit and post people live in. So I call that the mythic stage. We're seeing the battle of mythic stages go through the homeopathic process now. So people are trying to translate themselves into a mythic stage. They're trying to define themselves, the technological clothing that they're made up of, what they're dedicated to. That's what the culture war is. It's not really a comprehensive enough phrase. It's a mythic war. And myth doesn't mean false. It just means it's iconic and simple with much contained in it. So that each mythic stage can go on for millennia discussing its services and disservices. And so the individual is blogging, explaining their mythic process of their mythic devotion to the mythic technologies that they think that they are preserving. And, you know, we saw that last week in Paris, where the guardians of the culture told everybody to become mythic, become French myth, eat, drink, and be merry, and study and converse like the French are known to do. That's what they were told was threatened, that they must retrieve their mythic stage, their mythic form of sort of visual acoustic culture that is France. And of course, the Americans did 12, 14 years before, when Bush hoiked up the kinetic bias of Americans and said, go shopping. That's kinetic. Whereas the French are acoustic, more acoustic. Within the visual effect of Gutenberg, their subset is they're acoustic as opposed to the British. That's why there's tension between the British and the French. And so the French represent great acoustic elaboration along visual space parameters, all the time being threatened. And the postmodern theorists came out of France trying to retrieve visual space via Britain, whereas the Britons adopted acoustic space as a patina of fakery, and that's known as the British invasion and the punk rock.
Yes, there was homage to the victims of the attacks that also took place on Friday 13th. That's the same date as the Templars were
massacred.
Yeah. So that's again the retrieval of the Crusades, and
yes,
in that homage of the fallen, of the victims, the President Hollande said the fanatics attacked the music. They don't like the music. They made a big deal of the attacks being in a concert hall, as you said, because it's acoustic culture. So I wanted to comment on that, but I also wanted to say...
Is that, you're saying that Mr. President Holland said that?
Yes.
He actually singled out the cultural icons.
Yes.
The stadium and the music center. That's his mythic stage.
Yes, and in a way the chart is like the Odyssey, the Odyssey of all humanity coming back to the place of power and to completion.
Yeah, in Carolyn Guertin's basically the last chapter on Pakistan and China, she talks about this artist who, Mio or something, M-I-A-O, who replays a lot of the great paintings of history, but he puts himself in them. He puts his image of his naked self, this naked male, occupies all the content of the historical, classical, great paintings that he remixes in his video or whatever medium he's using. The idea that he's putting himself through history, that's a pretty good prediction.